I never thought leaving for a short trip could turn my life upside down. I kissed my grandpa goodbye that morning, thinking everything at home would be exactly as I left it, quiet, safe, normal. Grandpa had always been the kind of man who carried his own world in his hands. He was stubborn, proud, and fiercely independent, the kind of person who believed rules were made to live by, not to bend for convenience. I trusted him completely. I thought that no matter what, he could handle anything life threw at him. But that morning, everything changed. I was halfway through my flight when my phone buzzed relentlessly. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was spam or some minor notification. But then the messages started pouring in. Multiple notifications from my HOA, a couple from neighbors I barely spoke to, and finally, a call I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped when I saw the words on the screen. Eviction notice. Immediate action required. Law enforcement contacted. My fingers shook as I swiped through the messages. They claimed my grandpa had violated HOA rules, that his property was non-compliant, and that if he didn't vacate immediately, the authorities would take over. My mind raced. Eviction? At his age? While I'm not even there. The thought made my chest tighten. Grandpa had lived in that house for decades. He had poured his heart into it, and now some strangers were threatening to rip it away from him. I tried calling him, but the line kept going to voicemail. My heart pounded faster with each ring that didn't connect. I pictured him sitting in his favorite chair, the one by the window overlooking the garden he had spent years cultivating, completely unaware of the chaos about to descend on his life. I could almost see him smiling politely, maybe trying to figure out why a formal letter or a knock on the door had caused such commotion. Then I got another message. This one made my blood run cold. We've called the police. They will arrive shortly to enforce the notice. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or just throw my phone across the room. Everything I had taken for granted about my neighborhood, the supposed peace, the friendly community, the rules that were meant to protect residents, felt like a lie. How could anyone justify calling the cops on an elderly man who had done nothing but live quietly and respect his neighbors? By the time the plane touched down, I was trembling. My mind was racing with questions I didn't have answers to yet. Why now? Why my grandpa? Was this really just a minor HOA dispute? Or was there something deeper at play? And most importantly, what would happen when I got home? I rushed through the airport, heart hammering, feeling like every second I wasted made the situation worse. As I drove toward my neighborhood, every familiar street, every passing house, felt different somehow. The quiet cul-de-sacs I had walked through countless times suddenly felt threatening, like I was entering enemy territory without knowing it. When I finally reached our street, I froze. In front of my grandpa's house were two men in uniform. My first thought was fear, they're here to evict him. But as I slowed down, I noticed something strange. They weren't aggressive. They weren't shouting or pushing anyone around. Instead, they were looking at the house in a way that seemed cautious, even respectful. My heart skipped a beat. Could this really be happening? Were these the officers the HOA had called? Or was there more going on than I realized? Something about the way they stood, their posture, their eyes, it didn't scream enforcers. It screamed allies. But why? I stepped out of the car, gripping the steering wheel as if it could somehow steady my nerves. Grandpa appeared at the door, his expression calm but alert, the kind of calm that came from knowing more than anyone else around him. He gave me a small nod, almost apologetic, almost conspiratorial. And that's when I realized, whatever was about to happen, this was bigger than a simple HOA dispute. Bigger than a few letters, bigger than some rules. The real story, the one that would change everything, was just beginning. I took a deep breath, stepping toward the door, my mind racing with fear, anger, and confusion. And just as I reached for the handle, the officers turned toward me, their eyes locking with mine in a way that promised something I wasn't ready for. The moment hung there, suspended in tension, and I knew one thing for certain. I had no idea how wild this ride was about to get. As I stepped closer to the door, my grandpa's calmness both reassured and unnerved me. There was something in the way he held himself, a quiet confidence that made me pause. I realized then that my panic was partly because I didn't know the full story, How much did he know that I didn't? Grandpa had always been more than just an elderly man living alone. He had fought his own battles long before I came into the picture. Growing up, I remembered him telling stories of strict landlords, unfair rules, and people trying to push him out of places he loved. He had survived worse than an overzealous homeowners association. But those were stories, memories from a different time, and I had never imagined they would matter in our quiet suburban street. I glanced around the house. Everything was as it should be. The garden, though slightly overgrown, still bloomed with flowers my grandpa nurtured for years. The front porch light flickered softly, casting warm glows across his face as he stood there. And yet, there was a tension in the air that made the house, usually a safe haven, feel like a battlefield. As I finally knocked, he opened the door wider and stepped aside, gesturing for me to come in. Inside, the familiar smell of old wood, lavender, and his pipe tobacco wrapped around me like a memory. But it couldn't erase the anxiety gnawing at me. My mind refused to settle. I needed to understand why now? Why him? Grandpa, what's going on? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured toward the living room, where a small stack of letters lay neatly on the coffee table. Some were official-looking HOA notices, others were typed letters with strict deadlines. I picked one up, reading it carefully. The language was formal, even cold, but the message was clear. Vacate the property, or law enforcement would intervene. He finally spoke, his voice calm but layered with a depth I hadn't noticed before. They've been trying for a while, he said, almost in a whisper. This HOA. They think they can control everything, but they don't know what they're dealing with. I felt a mix of fear and frustration. How had this gone unnoticed until now? Had neighbors reported him? Or was this purely a power move by the association? I wanted answers, but I also wanted to protect him from whatever storm was coming. Grandpa looked older than ever in that moment, yet there was an intensity in his eyes, a determination I hadn't fully appreciated as a child, that told me he wasn't someone you could push around. Then my thoughts drifted back to my absence. Just hours earlier, I had trusted everything would be fine, that this house, this neighborhood, was safe. But now, I realized how little I actually knew about the dynamics in our supposedly peaceful community. The HOA had a reputation, sure, but I had assumed it was all formalities and polite disputes. I had no idea they could go so far. Grandpa led me to the window overlooking the street. I saw the officers standing just beyond the yard, their stance watchful, yet almost protective. That's when I started to notice small details. Subtle glances, quick nods between them, hints that they weren't here to enforce punishment but to follow someone's instructions. Instructions I didn't understand yet. The mystery deepened. You have to understand, he said, turning back to me, his voice a mixture of caution and urgency. Sometimes the people who call the shots think they know the rules, but they don't know the history, or me. I swallowed hard, the weight of what he was hinting at settling over me. There were secrets here, ones that had been buried under decades of quiet life, and I had just stumbled into them. My curiosity warred with my fear. How far had this conflict gone? And what else had my grandpa been holding back, not just from the HOA, but from me? Every corner of the house seemed to hum with unspoken stories. Family heirlooms, old photographs, letters tucked away in drawers. Each one hinted at resilience, fights fought quietly, victories earned through patience and wit. The realization hit me. This wasn't just about an eviction. It was about respect, legacy, and the way one man refused to be pushed around, no matter who tried. And yet, the tension didn't lift. The letters, the officers, the HOA, it all pressed down like a storm waiting to break. I could feel it in my chest, the same mix of fear, anger, and anticipation that had started the moment I saw those first notifications. As I stood there, listening to the soft hum of the house and the distant street sounds, I realized one thing. The next few hours would decide everything. And I had no idea what I was walking into. The question lingered in my mind, heavy and unresolved. How had a routine neighborhood dispute escalated into something that could bring the law to my grandfather's doorstep? And why did it feel like the people who were supposed to punish him might actually be on our side? Grandpa led me into the kitchen, where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint scent of old wood polish. The room felt ordinary, safe, yet the air was thick with unspoken tension. I could sense that behind his calm exterior, he was calculating every move, preparing for a confrontation I wasn't ready to witness. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. "We need to talk." I obeyed, though my hands were still trembling. I realized I had been seeing him only as my grandpa, the kind, gentle man who baked cookies and told stories. But there was another side, a strategist, someone who had navigated more battles than I could imagine. "They've been watching for weeks," he said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. "You think this is sudden, but it isn't. The HOA doesn't act without a reason, and neither do the neighbors who complain. Someone's been feeding them information." I frowned. Feeding them information? Who would do that? And why? Grandpa shook his head. "That's what I've been trying to figure out. Some people in the neighborhood, they want control. They don't care about the truth. And sometimes, even the people closest to you can be the ones who tip the balance against you." I felt a chill run down my spine. Could someone we trusted, someone I considered a friend or neighbor, be part of this? My mind raced through every interaction, every casual conversation I'd had with neighbors. Could a simple smile or small gesture hide something darker? Just then, my phone buzzed again. Another message from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or things get worse." I froze, staring at the screen. Grandpa's eyes met mine, calm but piercing. "You see," he said softly, "it's bigger than eviction. It's about fear, intimidation, and sometimes the only way to survive is to play their game without them knowing it." I had always thought of our home as a sanctuary, a place where love and loyalty protected us. But now it felt like a chessboard, and every friendly face could be a piece in someone else's strategy. I wanted to ask him how he knew so much, how he could stay calm when my heart was racing, but I hesitated. There was something he wasn't saying, and I sensed that revealing it now would make things worse. Then came a knock at the door. My stomach dropped. Were the HOA officers back? I moved cautiously toward the entrance, but when I opened it, it wasn't who I expected. It was Mr. Jenkins, a neighbor we'd known for years. He smiled politely, but there was a tension in his eyes, a flicker that didn't reach the warmth of his smile. "Evening," he said. "Thought I'd check in, make sure everything's okay." Grandpa's eyes narrowed slightly. "We're fine, but thank you for stopping by." Mr. Jenkins lingered, glancing at me. There was something in the way he hesitated before speaking, the slight pause that betrayed uncertainty, or was it guilt? Couldn't tell. My mind immediately suspected the worst. Was he involved? Was he the one feeding the HOA? Or was he genuinely concerned? As he left, Grandpa muttered under his breath, "People aren't always what they seem. That's a lesson you'll learn the hard way." I realized then that this wasn't just about the HOA or the cops. It was about the neighborhood, the subtle power struggles, the alliances and betrayals that could unfold in ways I couldn't predict. Every smile, every casual conversation might be hiding a hidden agenda. And I was right in the middle of it. Later that night, while the house was quiet, I found myself unable to sleep. I went to the study, where stacks of papers, old photographs, and faded letters covered the desk. Grandpa had kept meticulous records of every conflict, every encounter with the HOA and other neighbors who had tried to push him around. Some of the letters hinted at legal disputes, others at threats thinly veiled in civility. It was a lifetime of careful observation, preparation, and resistance. I realized then that my grandpa had been ready for this kind of battle for years. But I also realized something else. Even the strongest strategies had weaknesses. The HOA might have misjudged him, but the unknown forces, those anonymous threats, the hidden alliances were unpredictable. And in this game, one wrong move could change everything. Outside, the street was quiet. Shadows from the streetlights stretched across the yard like long fingers, hinting at the uncertainty waiting beyond the walls of the house. I knew one thing for certain. By morning, the situation would escalate. The HOA, the neighbors, the mysterious threats. All of it was converging, and there was no turning back. I glanced at Grandpa, asleep in his chair, seemingly peaceful. But I knew better. He was already thinking 10 moves ahead, and I was just learning the rules of the game. And somewhere, deep down, I knew the real battle, the one that would test loyalty, courage, and family ties, was only just beginning. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the living room, warm but deceptive. Everything looked calm, almost peaceful. But I knew better. The air felt charged, like the calm before a storm. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant car passing by, set my nerves on edge. Grandpa was in the kitchen again, pouring himself coffee, moving with a rhythm that suggested decades of routine. But his eyes were sharp, scanning the windows, measuring each sound outside. I watched him, trying to read the expression that seemed to balance calmness and vigilance. He had learned long ago that appearances were everything, and danger often hid in plain sight. My phone buzzed. Another anonymous message. "They're watching. Don't make a move yet." I froze. The timing was precise. Someone knew I was awake. Someone was monitoring us. I didn't understand who or how, but the threat was clear. Grandpa glanced at me and then at the phone, and I realized he knew exactly what it meant. "They're testing you," he said quietly, his voice low. "You have to stay calm. One wrong reaction, one slip, and they'll use it against us." I wanted to argue. I wanted to fight back. But I could feel the tension knotting in my stomach. There was no room for recklessness here. Not now. Later, there was a knock at the door. My first instinct was panic, but Grandpa's hand on my shoulder stopped me. Calmly, he moved to the door and opened it just slightly. A man in a suit stood there, looking official. But there was something strange. His eyes didn't hold authority. They held calculation. "Good morning," the man said, voice polite, almost cordial. "I'm here regarding the HOA complaint." Grandpa's gaze didn't waver. "We're handling it," he said. But the man didn't leave. He smiled faintly, just enough to make his intentions unreadable. Then he slid a folded envelope into the doorframe. Without another word, he left. I picked up the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were documents, emails, invoices, and notes I didn't recognize. Someone had been keeping detailed records of everything Grandpa had done over the past months, maybe years. But why now? And why send it here? The tension built further that afternoon when I noticed shadows moving outside the yard. Not the usual passerby. These were precise, deliberate movements, almost rehearsed. My mind raced. The HOA? The neighbors? Or something else entirely? Couldn't tell. I felt trapped in a web I didn't fully understand. Grandpa sensed my growing panic. "You're thinking too much ahead," he said. "Focus on the present. Watch, listen, learn. That's how we stay ahead." I tried to follow his advice, but every time I glanced at the street, I felt a shiver. One car stopped too long at the end of the block. Another parked suspiciously close, its engine idling. I wondered how many people were involved, and which ones we could trust. My mind couldn't stop spinning scenarios. Then came the email notification on my laptop. I opened it to find a message from someone claiming to have inside knowledge of the HOA board. "If you value your grandfather, don't go outside. Not yet. They're not who they seem." My heartbeat spiked. Grandpa leaned over my shoulder, scanning the screen. "This confirms it," he said quietly. "They're not just bureaucrats. They've recruited others. There's a network. And right now, they're trying to provoke us." The realization hit hard. This wasn't just a local HOA dispute. It was bigger, more calculated. The people we thought were enforcers might be pawns. Or worse, co-conspirators. I could feel the layers of deception closing in. Every step we took, every move we made, could trigger something we weren't ready for. By evening, the tension was unbearable. The officers who had arrived the first day were now circling the neighborhood, making subtle checks, not for enforcement, but for observation. Every glance toward the house, every pause near the driveway, screamed that something critical was about to happen. I watched from the window, gripping the sill, my stomach tight. Grandpa stood behind me, calm yet alert, as if he could sense the storm moments before it arrived. And then it happened. A faint noise, a door across the street creaking, made me flinch. My eyes darted to the shadow moving quickly past the window. It vanished. Too fast to be a neighbor, too deliberate to be accidental. Grandpa's hand on my shoulder was firm now. "They're here," he whispered. "And soon we'll have no choice but to respond." My heart pounded in my chest. The officers, the HOA, the mysterious observers, and the anonymous threats, all of it was converging. The sense of dread was suffocating. Every instinct screamed that the confrontation we had been preparing for, dreading even, was seconds away. I swallowed hard. I had no idea what would happen next. But one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same after tonight. The night had grown heavier, darker, as if the shadows themselves were conspiring against us. Grandpa and I moved quietly through the house, each step measured, our ears tuned to the faintest sounds outside. I could feel the weight of what was coming pressing down on us. The air smelled of damp earth and something faintly metallic, like tension made tangible. Then my phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. I almost didn't look, afraid of what it might say, but curiosity and fear won over. The message read, "They're not who you think. Trust no one." I looked at Grandpa, expecting him to shrug it off, but he froze. His face went pale, not with fear, but with recognition. He grabbed the phone from my hands and read it again, slowly. Then he muttered under his breath, "It's worse than I thought. Much worse." Before I could ask what he meant, the doorbell rang. Sharp, insistent. I jumped. Grandpa motioned for silence. We crept to the window. Outside, there was a car parked in the driveway, but it wasn't the officers or the HOA representatives. It was Mr. Jenkins. My heart sank. After everything, could he really be involved? But when I looked closer, I noticed his expression wasn't hostility. It was panic, confusion, fear. He was carrying a thick envelope and glancing nervously around, as if expecting someone else to appear any second. Grandpa opened the door cautiously. Mr. Jenkins blurted out, "They've been lying. The HOA. It's not the board calling the shots. Someone else, someone inside." He stopped abruptly, eyes darting behind him. Then he thrust the envelope into Grandpa's hands and bolted. Grandpa ripped it open. Inside were documents, photos, and emails, evidence of a hidden faction within the HOA, a group using their authority to manipulate, intimidate, and cover up personal agendas. But the most shocking part was a list of names. And among them, mine. I felt my stomach drop. Why would my name be on a list? Grandpa's face hardened as he scanned the pages. "They've been watching you too," he said, voice low. "Every move, every trip, every call. They planned this to get both of us at the same time." The revelation hit me like a punch. The people we thought were allies, the officers, even the HOA members we trusted, were pawns in something much bigger. Someone was orchestrating this entire ordeal, manipulating fear to control us. And now, the threat wasn't just my grandpa's home. It was personal. As if on cue, the lights outside flickered. A shadow moved across the yard. I froze. Grandpa's hand on my shoulder was steady, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. They're testing us, watching how we react. Then another twist, the phone rang. The caller ID was blocked. Grandpa answered. A distorted voice whispered, "You don't know the whole truth. Check your walls. The key is closer than you think." And just like that, the line went dead. Grandpa and I exchanged a glance. The moral dilemma hit me hard. We could either confront whoever was behind this now, risking everything without knowing who was truly on our side, or wait, bide our time, and gather more evidence. But waiting meant living under constant threat. Acting meant risking our lives. I thought about Mr. Jenkins. Had he been a traitor or a scared messenger? Could we trust him, or was he part of the larger deception? Every instinct screamed that we were walking a tightrope, one misstep away from disaster. Then I noticed it. A small picture frame on the mantel, slightly tilted. Grandpa picked it up, and behind it was a hidden compartment containing a USB drive. I felt a surge of hope mixed with terror. Whatever was on that drive could change everything. But retrieving it also meant exposing ourselves to whoever was watching. Grandpa glanced at me. This is the turning point. Whatever's on that drive could either protect us or ruin us completely. I nodded, swallowing hard. My mind raced with the moral stakes. Do we fight now or risk the uncertainty of waiting? Every option carried consequences that could affect not just our safety, but our trust in every person around us. Outside, I could hear the faint hum of a car engine, distant footsteps, a shadow shifting again. The world beyond our doors was alive with hidden threats, unseen eyes, and calculated moves. And in that moment, I realized the battle wasn't just for the house. It was for truth, for justice, for our lives. Grandpa slid the USB into his pocket. We have the edge now, he said quietly. But the next move will be the most dangerous yet. My chest tightened. I had no idea what awaited us next. One thing was certain, the story we thought we understood had just turned upside down. And there was no going back. By the time night fell, the neighborhood felt like a different world. Silent, tense, charged with anticipation. Grandpa and I stood side by side in the living room, the USB drive clutched tightly in his hand. Every shadow outside, every flicker of light, seemed like a potential threat. The culmination of weeks of manipulation, hidden threats, and surveillance was finally about to reach its breaking point. We knew the officers outside, the ones the HOA had called, were watching. But now, armed with evidence, we had the upper hand. Grandpa had always taught me patience, strategy, and reading people. Tonight, those lessons would matter more than ever. The front doorbell rang. Sharp, insistent. My stomach twisted. Grandpa motioned for silence. Slowly, he opened the door, just a crack. The officers stood there, but this time their posture was different. Calm, respectful, almost deferential. It was the first time I realized the truth. These weren't adversaries. They were allies all along, quietly loyal, waiting for the right moment to act. "Evening, sir," one of them said, nodding at Grandpa. "We've been monitoring the HOA's actions. Their threats, they overstepped. You have everything you need to protect yourself." Grandpa's eyes narrowed. "And the others?" he asked. "They won't interfere tonight," the officer replied. "You're covered." I could hardly believe it. The people we feared, the enforcers we thought would punish us, had been part of our hidden support. The tension that had gripped us for days began to shift, but it wasn't over yet. The real confrontation remained inside the house. Grandpa slid the USB into his laptop. Files opened, emails, photos, audio recordings, even video evidence of the HOA faction's manipulations, bribes, and intimidation campaigns. Names, dates, messages, it was everything we needed to expose them. Just then, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was Mr. Jenkins. I froze, unsure whether to trust him. Grandpa didn't hesitate. He opened the door, and Mr. Jenkins stepped inside, eyes wide. You have the proof?" he asked. Grandpa nodded. "We do. And now it's time for the truth to come out." Mr. Jenkins swallowed hard. "I tried to warn you before. I couldn't step forward until I knew you were ready. The HOA, some of them, they're dangerous. Not just bureaucratic power-hungry. They hide more than anyone knows." The room grew heavy with realization. Grandpa's earlier warnings, the anonymous messages, the watchful shadows, they were all part of a deeper plan. And the twist hit me. The real danger wasn't the HOA itself, but the people behind it, pulling strings, hiding in plain sight. We uploaded the evidence to a secure channel, sending copies to the local authorities, media contacts, and legal teams prepared to act. Moments later, sirens echoed in the distance. Officers from outside the neighborhood arrived, not to evict, but to enforce justice, to prevent any retaliation from the HOA faction. Grandpa leaned back in his chair, exhaustion and relief washing over him. I finally allowed myself to breathe. The immediate threat was neutralized. The house, the neighborhood, and our safety were secured. And yet, The twist that no one expected came next. As we reviewed the files one last time, we found a note tucked away on the USB, in handwriting I recognized instantly. It wasn't from the HOA, the officers, or even Mr. Jenkins. It was from someone inside our own family, a distant cousin we had trusted implicitly, who had been feeding information to the HOA faction for weeks. Every move we thought we were making secretly had been observed. Every message, every attempt to protect ourselves had been predicted. Grandpa's jaw tightened. "I should have seen this," he murmured, a mix of disappointment and resolve in his voice. Sometimes, the closest people are the ones you have to watch the most. I felt a cold shock run through me. Betrayal, hidden agendas, threats both known and unknown. It wasn't over. But for the first time in days, I also felt something I hadn't felt since this nightmare began. Control. Grandpa and I had faced the worst. We had survived, adapted, and turned fear into a weapon. The final image of that night stayed with me. Grandpa, seated in his chair, eyes sharp even in exhaustion, and me standing beside him, watching the street outside with clarity and purpose. The neighborhood was silent again. But we knew now that even in quiet streets, shadows lingered. I glanced at the camera we had set up to monitor the house. Every hidden camera, every motion sensor, every careful plan had been necessary. And as we finally relaxed, Grandpa smiled faintly. "Lesson learned," he said softly. "Trust wisely, watch closely, and never underestimate what a determined family can do." I nodded, and deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. A story that had started with fear had grown into strategy, courage, and revelation. And one last thought echoed in my mind. Even when the fight seems over, the shadows always hold one more secret. The morning after the chaos, the neighborhood looked completely ordinary. Sunlight filtered through the trees, birds chirped in the yard, and for a moment, I almost forgot what had happened the night before. But the quiet was different now. It was earned, hard-won, layered with the weight of lessons and survival. Grandpa and I sat together on the porch, sipping tea. The house around us felt like a sanctuary again, familiar and safe, yet everything had changed. The HOA faction had been exposed, the evidence we collected had reached the authorities, and the officers who had once seemed like threats were now silent allies, keeping watch until the situation was fully resolved. Justice, at least for now, had been served. I looked at Grandpa, really looked at him, and I saw more than the grandfather I had always known. I saw resilience. I saw wisdom forged from years of challenges, battles fought quietly, and victories won through patience and strategy. I realized that his calm exterior had always been a shield, not just for himself, but for those who depended on him. For me. "You did all this for me?" I asked softly, overwhelmed by the weight of the events we had navigated together. He smiled faintly, eyes twinkling with a mixture of pride and relief. "We did it together," he said. "But never forget, sometimes protecting what's yours isn't just about following rules. It's about understanding people, anticipating moves, and staying calm when everyone else panics." I thought about Mr. Jenkins too, the neighbor who had risked his own reputation to bring us crucial information. His choices had reminded me that loyalty and courage sometimes come from unexpected places. Even in a world where deception had run deep, there were still people willing to do the right thing. That delicate balance between trust and caution had been tested more than ever, and we had survived it. There were questions I still had, lingering like shadows in the corners of my mind. What had motivated the distant cousin to betray us? How many more hidden agendas existed beyond our view? Could peace ever feel permanent after such an ordeal? Grandpa didn't have all the answers, but he reminded me that the point wasn't knowing every secret. It was staying vigilant, learning from every challenge, and choosing wisely who to trust. I also reflected on myself. I had gone from being a passive observer to an active participant, forced to think quickly, act decisively, and question assumptions I had taken for granted. I had learned courage, yes, but also humility. Life had a way of revealing who you really are, especially when danger hits unexpectedly. As we sat on the porch, the sun climbing higher, I realized the true victory wasn't just keeping the house or exposing the HOA. It was about the lessons learned along the way. It was about family, trust, strategy, and resilience. Grandpa had shown me that sometimes the most ordinary people, living quiet, steady lives, carry extraordinary strength and knowledge within them. I turned to him. "Do you think it's really over?" He shook his head slightly, smiling. "Nothing is ever completely over. Life has a way of testing you again. But now we know how to face it. And that matters more than anything." I took a deep breath, letting the warmth of the sun and the relief of surviving the ordeal wash over me. The house was still standing. Our family ties were stronger. And the neighborhood, though scarred by deceit and fear, had seen justice done. For me, the takeaway was clear. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the choice to act despite it. Strategy, patience, and loyalty can turn even the darkest moments into victories. And sometimes, the people who seem ordinary are the ones capable of extraordinary things. As I watched Grandpa smile, I knew this story was more than just about an HOA dispute or a sudden threat. It was about the bonds we forge, the choices we make, and the resilience that defines us. The experience had left its mark, but it had also left me wiser, stronger, and more grateful than ever. So, if you're watching this story unfold, remember, life will test you. It will push you to your limits. But with courage, vigilance, and trust in the right people, you can face even the most unexpected battles and come out stronger. And if you want to see the next part of the story, learn the secrets we uncovered, and follow our journey as we navigate new challenges, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Because sometimes, the ordinary can teach us the most extraordinary lessons.